All right, today we're tackling a huge question, drawing from some really fascinating research. We're going to explore the deep evolutionary reasons why school can feel like such an uphill battle for so many. Let's get right into it.
You know the story, right? Maybe you've seen it yourself. A kid who is incredibly smart, curious, and creative, but in a classroom setting, they just seem to switch off. They get bored, they act out, they struggle. So what's really going on?
Well, the core idea we're digging into today is a powerful one. What if the problem isn't the kid? What if it's a fundamental mismatch between how our brains are actually wired to learn and how our schools are designed to teach?
So let's start by looking at the central issue, what the researchers call the motivation problem. This is really the heart of the friction.
Think about it. Our modern world demands that we learn some seriously abstract stuff. Calculus, chemistry, grammar rules. These are amazing tools, for sure, but they're a million miles away from the kinds of immediate, real-world problems our brains evolved over millennia to solve.
And this is where the trouble starts. The research points out that forcing our brains to focus on these abstract topics directly clashes with what we are naturally driven to do. It's like our built-in motivational compass is pointing one way, but the school system is trying to drag us in a completely different direction.
To really get this, we've got to rewind the clock way, way back. We need to understand the original software that our brains are running on. What does that ancient learning brain of ours actually look like?
For pretty much our entire existence as a species, learning wasn't about getting an A on a test. It was about survival. It was about figuring out which berries were safe to eat, how to work with others in your tribe, and how to navigate your physical world. Our brains got really good at that kind of learning.
So, how are we wired to learn? Well, the research boils it down to three key instincts. First, we are deeply social learners. We learn by watching, copying, and collaborating with others. Second, we're physical. We learn by doing, by moving, by tinkering with the world around us. And third, we are driven by a powerful internal curiosity. That little voice that says, hey, I wonder what happens if I do this. So, what happens when you take that ancient, survival-oriented brain and drop it into a modern classroom? Well, you get what this research calls the great mismatch.
And here is where it all becomes crystal clear. Our brains evolved to learn socially, in groups, but school often focuses on individual quiet work. Our brains evolved to learn physically by interacting with things, but school often teaches abstractly through lectures and textbooks. And our brains are wired for bottom-up exploration, learning by discovering, but school is usually built on top-down instruction. You see the clash, right? It's everywhere.
What this all adds up to is a system that isn't just a poor fit, it's often in direct opposition to our natural instincts. We're asking kids to fight against their own wiring to succeed, and that is a massive, massive challenge for anyone. Okay, so that's the diagnosis. It might sound a little bleak, but here's the good news. The research doesn't just point out the problem, it actually proposes a solution, a new path forward. Let's be real, we are not going to rewire millions of years of evolution. That's just not on the table. So the only real solution is to change our methods, to build an educational system that works with our nature, not against it.
The first piece of the puzzle that researchers bring in is something called self-determination theory, or SDT. It's a really powerful framework for understanding what truly motivates us from the inside out.
So according to SDT, all humans, kids, and adults need three basic things to feel intrinsically motivated. We need autonomy, which is the feeling of having a choice. We need competence, that feeling of, hey, I'm actually good at this. And we need relatedness, the need to feel connected to the people around us. When you hit those three notes, real motivation kicks in.
The second key idea is the Dynamical systems framework. Now that sounds super technical, but the concept is actually pretty simple. It just means that learning isn't a neat straight line. It's messy, it's complex, it's full of twists and turns, and it's constantly adapting. So here's the big idea. What if you bring these two things together? The proposal is to weave the motivational power of self-determination theory into this flexible, dynamic view of learning. In other words, Let's create learning environments that are not only adaptable, but also feed our core human needs. So, we've gone through the problem and a potential solution, but let's bring it all home. Why does any of this really matter?
The end goal here is both simple and profound: to stop fighting against human nature in the classroom and start working with it. It's about building an educational system that actually honors the incredible learning machine we all have inside us.
So, what's the takeaway? Well, it really starts by just acknowledging this mismatch exists. From there, we can focus on designing learning that gives students a sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And by creating more flexible, hands-on environments, we can finally tap back into that powerful, natural motivation that every single child is born with. Just imagine that for a second. A school that doesn't feel like a chore you have to get through, but like a genuine adventure. A place where our natural drive to explore, to connect, and to master things isn't an obstacle, but the actual engine of learning. And that's the question I want to leave you with. It's a big one, but it's so important. What could education truly become if we stop trying to fit square pegs into round holes and instead design schools for the amazing, ancient, and powerful brains we actually have?